we get into the field of private practice and inherit this community panic of more clients, more clients, more clients. From a business perspective, it makes complete sense. But if we think about our lives, we are not friends with everyone. We don't invite every person we meet at the grocery store into our home. We don't always even have family members we like. And yet, when we get into private practice, we immediately have this worry of more, which can often be so incongruent to how we live.
This is Therapist Clubhouse, a podcast for private practice entrepreneurs. I'm Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Nam Rindani, a private practice entrepreneur in San Diego, California. Listen as she goes deep in sharing her beautiful and rebellious journey as a business person. Hello, Nam. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Annie. It's so exciting to finally get to speak to you. I'm very excited about our conversation.
Me too. So I want to talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey. Can you tell us about your private practice, starting with how long you've been in private practice and who you see?
Absolutely. So when I introduce myself, and this is something I think we as therapists are not used to, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. I introduce myself as a business owner, and one of the businesses I have is my private practice. So my private practice has, it started back in early 2010, and I started off, fresh out of practicum, and in about a month after graduating, I got into private practice, and I haven't stopped since. So I've gone back and forth between full-time and part-time. Now I am in full-time private practice in San Diego, and while I see a wide range of people, the specialization that I absolutely give my heart and soul to is working with men. That's one. And the other is working with people in leadership positions, activists, upper management, executives, and I cover all genders in both specializations. When I say men, I mean people who identify with a more male kind of construct. And that is something that I've done from the start, and only now fully stepped into it as being it's my main jam.
Oh, how cool. And I haven't heard, I really like this idea of leadership, including activists. Yeah. How did you come to that?
So, Annie, I think given our current social, cultural, political climate, what I have been noticing for a while is that activists have always existed. However, stepping into the identity of an activist and as a leader is something not many people even talk about, right? Because we think of activists as those hippie people who march and, write letters and don't have real jobs. However, in the course of my work in the last few years, I have noticed that there are so many moms, there are so many executives, there are teachers, there are doctors, there are people in a wide realm of professional settings who are actually closeted activists, but are not being identified as such. So in my work, because I work from a social justice orientation, a lot of my conversations would involve activism-based topics, regardless of the issue at hand. And in doing that, I started to recognize that there are more activists around than we know. And so one way that I decided to fully serve this fairly hidden until recently population is to put their name out there. And so even on my website, the specialization I speak to is activism. It's activists.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. How do people tend to find you?
People tend to this day, it's been 7 years. Word of mouth still remains my main kind of way of being found. And when I say that, I fully own why that is. I am a therapist who didn't have a website until 6 months ago.
I didn't know that, Nam.
Most people don't, Annie.
Yeah.
I fought websites and business cards and all of the marketing musts for most of my private practice.
Yeah.
And 6 months ago, I decided to take that plunge, and I finally found a way of writing and creating a website that felt very real and authentic to me. And so now I have one. But until then, I didn't have a website. I have a professional page, but I don't really post memes with quotes, or I don't do any of the traditional marketing things. But what I absolutely do is I put myself out there in different ways. And so when people hear what I write or what I say, or read comments that I make, the word passes.
Mm-hmm.
And then friends get recommended and coworkers get recommended. And I've wound up building a fairly robust caseload. It's full. It's been full for a while, and it comes through connection.
So it's so interesting. You've really put yourself out there in these different ways, and you've got a Facebook group for therapists in private practice with over 4,700 members.
Yes.
Maybe more as people are listening to this. But so it's not like you've been staying away from the internet entirely. So it's really interesting. And
yes.
I love hearing this, that you found a way to make a website feel right to you. And that's when you made one.
Absolutely. And I'm excited that you bringing up the use of the internet, because I think, and it makes sense that this message is out there. I think we as a therapist community often get fairly boxed into how to use social media to get clients.
Yeah.
I am known to be rebellious about a lot of things. And I now own that label fairly proudly. The part that I feel rarely gets spoken about is there are ways to use the internet that don't involve blogging 3 times a week about 10 ways to beat depression, or do not have, an active Facebook page. I think all of those things are absolutely important, and I don't discourage them. But I think it's more important to identify who you are as a person and how it is that you want to be known and how it is that you want to speak to your clients. I don't get clients who are going to pass on, viral Facebook memes, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have clients who are interested in the more generic kind of form of blogging.
Mm-hmm.
And they will tell me that to my face. Because in some way, I think we attract clients who are similar to who we are, or at least we should.
Yeah.
And so the way I've gone about using the internet is to completely use it to allow myself to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
So even my personal Facebook page, even though people talk about not getting clients from that, I get very steady referrals from my personal Facebook page because I share things about my life. I write in a very, very open way. With the result, my friends, quote unquote, will see who I am. And when they have someone in mind, they will send me clients based on how it is that I spoke about life.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It totally does. And for example, I'm thinking this was on Instagram that I saw this, something that's just been sticking with me for however long it's been since you posted it. It was over a week ago, something about mason jars and how you have, it was about self-care basically, and how you have mason jars with juice and that you bring them into session. You don't hide your self-care from your clients. And that has just stuck with me. I don't know how many times I've been thinking about these mason jars. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So I think it's really, if you had planned something out, like, well, on Mondays, I'm going to post this kind of generic inspirational quote. And then on Tuesdays, it wouldn't have the same, I would have completely forgotten it.
That is actually really helpful to hear, because for me, even my relationship with social media and specifically Instagram, which is very new to me, I've had to really sit down and ask myself, so who is it that I want to be on Instagram? Mm-hmm. Who do I want to speak to? Does it have to be my ideal client, or can it just be a way for me to be really honest, really authentic, and have fun without being attached to the outcome of this will bring me 5 new clients this week.
Yeah.
And so the day that I posted, I think I had 3 different mason jars with 3 different kinds of juices. And my clients, they find it so funny that I'm the therapist who sits with all these mason jars. But that's what you get. And I think it's important for us as therapists to allow our clients to see how we live.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Why would we be hiding that?
My mason jars is one way to let clients know that, look, I get hungry too.
Yeah.
I've been talking all day, and for you to get this level of energy from me, I cannot do it with an empty tank. So, right. And I will tell my clients that if you want to bring your lunch into session, please do. Here's my lunch. I'm bringing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I did not know that your website was 6 months old, but I did notice how personal it was. Not personal, like I didn't see a lot of personal information, but personal in that it felt like it was you talking and being transparent. Mm-hmm. So what went into you finding a way to write that?
So to be transparent, Annie, I wrote all of my website copy, every single word on there in a day. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I had shied away from creating a website was because I didn't want to write the way I was told I was supposed to, because it didn't fit me. It didn't fit the kind of person I want to see week after week. But yet there was this message of your website is supposed to get you clients, right? And so there's a certain way to speak to them. And when I sat down to actually create this website, I went through many different revisions over the course of a week, and I absolutely hated every single one. Because it all sounded correct, but it did not sound like me. And so what I decided to do was to get my kind of website copy page up and think of this one person that I can think of.
Perfect.
And only focus on writing this letter to them. And when I say that, Annie, what actually surprised me about my own process in that was I assumed that I would write to my ideal client. And I didn't. The person I very organically started to write to, and this is not something I've shared with almost anyone ever, was my future child who would be struggling with these issues.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And it makes me kind of tear up to just think about, because I imagined if there was someone as close to me as my future child or my partner or someone who I love so deeply, and they were this adult who were really, really struggling, what would I want to say to them? What would I want them to know in the 30 seconds to 3 minutes that they're going to be on this website? And that's all I focused on. And I just wrote to them.
That is so deep.
It was a very, very deep process. And it continues to be a deep process, even as I keep going back to revise it. And that's kind of part of how I work as well, is if it's not deep, then I don't feel interested in my own work.
Yes. Yes. And also, who cares that if you write in a really unique way, it's not going to appeal to everyone. That's wonderful. Who cares? I mean, you don't need to work with everyone.
And it's so interesting that, we get into the field of private practice and inherit this community panic of more clients, more clients, more clients. From a business perspective, it makes complete sense. But if we think about our lives, we are not friends with everyone. We don't invite every person we meet at the grocery store into our home. We don't always even have family members we like. And yet, when we get into private practice, we immediately have this worry of more.
Yes. Yes.
Which can often be so incongruent to how we live. And so even when I created my website, I was not interested in getting more clients. I was interested in the one person reading my website to walk away going, well, that was either fun or that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I wasn't even attached to the idea of every person who comes to my website has to become my client. They don't.
Yeah. Yeah. One way I like to think of it is that when your client comes to your website, they know that they're your client, and that like that's all. That we don't want. Yeah. Like I see this thing happening where people, when they're building their practices, they're scared and they want to bring in as many people as possible. But then however they end up doing that, they end up filling their practices, and then the story really changes to, oh, wait a minute, like this isn't the practice I want. Who do I really want to be working with, or how can I be working the way that really fits me? And so, I mean, the idea of just starting from a place of, I'm not trying to invite everybody into this thing. It just makes so much sense.
Exactly. I love what you said there, because something, it's similar to what you shared. Something that I noticed even in my own process and in that of colleagues is, before we ask the question, how many clients do I want? Mm-hmm. Or even who is it that I want to work with? There is a really important piece that is missing, which is, who am I?
Yeah.
Right? And if we ask ourselves, what is my identity and my identities about? What is it that I know for sure about myself? It's the self-awareness piece and step that gets completely skipped, and people rush into my ideal client before recognizing what are the ideal parts of me that I want to share with the client community.
Yes.
And making that more, solid and known.
Yeah, really spending some time there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we usually, being therapists, usually we know, but that's different than being able to articulate it, being able to own it, and really sit with it.
And Annie, I think our field is such a gift in emphasizing, our personal development and our self-awareness and growth. And I think most therapists are aware of that. Even when we get into grad school, it's a very personal process. Something happens when we take the plunge into being business owners and entrepreneurs, where everything we knew about ourselves gets stripped in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And we're invited to kind of stitch it all back together in such a way that we like, but then it also pays our bills.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the struggle shows up.
Yes, absolutely. So interesting. What would you tell someone who's going to be writing their website now? What kind of advice or guidance would you have for them?
One of the first things I would say is, don't write your website copy. Write a letter. Write a text message to someone you really, really love. Mm-hmm. Write in your diary. Write in a journal. Write a story for your kids about depression. Find a different way to put how you think about things and how you feel about things out there without the pressure of, this is my website copy. Because the moment we make that association, there's all of this pressure that shows up that tells us, well, don't say it that way. You won't get clients. Right?
Yes.
It's, I remember the first kind of website copy I wrote, and I followed a formula that I got from a coach. And I showed it to my best friend of 30 years. And she looked at it and she said, without mincing words, and I love her for it, she said, why do all of you therapists sound like a drug commercial?
Yeah.
And Annie, think about it.
Yeah.
That's exactly how we sound sometimes. Are you depressed? Are you alone? Where does depression hurt?
Yeah.
She's like, well, I don't want to come see you if you sound like that. That was one of my biggest cues. So to someone who's writing their web copy, I would say find something really personal to think about. Find a person, find a way of speaking, whatever it may be for you, and just write it. And then when it's time for you to put it into website mode, you can edit as much or as little as you want, but don't start by writing your web copy. There's too much pressure there.
Love that. Yes. And then for some people, it might be talking. Like it might be talking and recording yourself if putting pen to paper or getting onto your keyboard shuts you down for some reason. But with that same intention that you're talking about, like talk to your future child, talk to your beloved.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think talking is the podcast interviews that I've done, the phone conversations that I've had are often little light bulbs for me as well. Because until someone asks me a question, I don't always pay attention to how I think about things. And so the idea of talking into a recorder or calling someone in the field, a colleague, and just, going back and forth on how it is that you work as a therapist, even that can become your web copy.
Yes. Yeah. And then that's going to be you.
Yes. We need more yous. We have enough therapists.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes. What is supporting therapists is a big deal for you. So you've got the Facebook group, and then you also have Rise and Fly. What is that?
Rise and Fly is one of the dearest parts of my practice. Rise and Fly is a specific service that I created for pre-licensed therapists who are in grad school, as well as, you get, you're a psych associate or you get your intern number and you're in that stage of your practice. And it's exclusively for pre-licensed therapists only. And it's a form of therapy service that I created and I offer that helps a pre-licensed therapist really, really get into the depths of who they really are, so that the day they get licensed, and whether it's private practice, agency work, or a hospital, the moment they get their licensure out there, they become a therapist who knows their stuff. Not just what they learned in grad school, but they can sit in front of a client, Annie, and know, you're saying some things that are really triggering to me. I'm not going to panic because I know where it comes from. And not only do I know where it comes from, I know exactly how to handle it in this moment.
Ooh. So I've never heard of anything like this before. It's not supervision.
It is not supervision.
So it's really, but it's not just therapy. It's like emotional preparation and
yes.
Why can't I time travel and do that with you?
You're not the first person to actually ask
really?
me that. And I've had supervisors ask me that, which is really, really funny.
Yeah.
And I am, as part of my kind of growth of Rise and Fly, I do want to create a third wing that is catered towards licensed therapists, whatever stage of their career they are in. But it's sort of with the idea of revisiting the pre-licensed therapist in you.
Yes. Okay.
Going back to being that beginner, going back to being that student, and doing that at a very personal level. So whatever it is that we explore from a therapeutic perspective, doing that in a way by which we also talk about how that's showing up in your therapist identity.
And there's so many times where I feel like we become a bit of that pre-licensed person again. Like when I stepped into training more deeply in certain areas, it was like feeling those feelings all over again. Like how do I incorporate this, and how do I become a beginner again and, be vulnerable, but also hold on to myself.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful that you even recognize that, Annie, because this is something I talk about often is something happens when we take those exams and we rightfully and very proudly feel that sense of accomplishment. I am now licensed. It's a very, very big deal. The thing I would encourage our community to think about for a second is that doesn't mean you've stopped being pre-licensed.
Yeah.
Much like when we grow up and become adults, we don't stop being the child we once were. We evolve, but we still have childhood favorites. We still have childhood fears.
Yes.
We may still get triggered in very, very young ways. And so being licensed is an extension of pre-licensure. It's not a separate journey. And so it's something I would encourage every licensed therapist, honestly, is to ask themselves every single day, how can I be pre-licensed today? How can I be a beginner again? What can I learn from that perspective again? What do I need to know about myself? Much like I needed to know these things when I first stepped into the therapy room for the first time ever.
Yeah, I feel like you're articulating something that's so important about like the difference between insecurity and vulnerability. That like it is great to feel some confidence or to feel some self-worth, but it's not useful, at least for me, it's not useful to try and get puffed up, like to try and feel as if I already know.
Yes, and I'm going to share a slightly personal story here that connects to Rise and Fly and what I even mean when I say what I do. I was once in an agency setting, Annie, and I was lead clinician, and we had some new management. And to cut a long story short, I had a colleague who was in her relatively beginning stages of being a therapist, but was extraordinary. She was very, very smart, very good at what she did. It showed in her client work. And she once came into my office to tell me that this new management had used language and specifically told her that, that she was good, but she was very green. And something really stirred up in me when she said that, because while I understand what one means when they say you're very green, it was said almost like an insult, like you're too raw. I see you, but you're not there yet. And how disempowering it was to hear that, as a description of a pre-licensed therapist.
Yes.
And so it was that moment that Rise and Fly actually began, because I realized that, of course, she was green. I am still green. You're still green. There are so many areas where we are still growing.
Yes.
And being green is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. That represents future potential. It represents a certain freshness and, growth and hope. We all want to be green about some things because that's how we keep growing. If we get to a place where we go, I'm done with that, I'm licensed, here's my number. What are we actually saying? Are we saying we're done with the growth of what it means to be a therapist? Because then comes decay.
Yes.
If you're not green, in some way you're deteriorating.
Yes.
And so I remembered that, that comment being made of a pre-licensed therapist being green. And I decided that I'm going to create something where pre-licensees will own being green and will be damn proud of it. To the point where licensed therapists, myself included, will wish they had stayed in touch with their greenness.
Yeah. I love it's making me want to have like the slogan, like stay green.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please stay green and keep watering whatever it is you're trying to grow, because it never stops.
Yes.
It gets neglected, but it never stops.
Now, if you could time travel to when you started your private practice, what would you tell the Nam of that time?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Don't spend all your money on Starbucks, because it takes a while to make some. That's one. But I think the most important thing I would want to go back and tell that Nam is be really careful and be very selective, very lovingly selective into who it is that you invite into your circle of influence. And keep auditing that, because at every stage of building a business, because even as a pre-licensee, that's what you're doing, Your supervisor babysits your practice for a while, and then you inherit it. You're a business owner the day you decide to see your first private practice client. And so be very, very careful in who it is that you turn to for guidance, for suggestions, for input. And while you want to stay open to as many angles and perspectives as you possibly can get, also get into the practice of auditing your circle, because not everyone will know who you are and not everyone will get what you are about. And it's important to pay attention to that, because someday your practice is going to be a direct reflection of who you are and who you are in the process of becoming. And you don't want that process to involve a bunch of stuff that someone said that you didn't agree with but adopted anyway.
So beautiful. Yeah, it makes me think of the idea of a soul protector, that you want to surround yourself with people who are going to be able to be protective of your soul.
Oof. Yes. Oh, I wish that even this makes me want, the position of sole proprietor. Be more sole proprietor.
Yes.
Right? Like change the spelling. Yes, you want to surround yourself with people who will protect your soul, because private practice is, I think any entrepreneurial and business venture is, if you allow it, it's going to get deep into who you are and mess things around for a little bit. You're going to be invited to really look at who you are, and all your fears are going to come out and all your strengths are going to come out as well. You don't want any and every person to hold the privilege of your process. You want to be selective about that.
Excellent. And Nam, what do you charge in your private practice?
So my fee currently is $120 for a 60-minute session. And I'm about to say some things that not a lot of people will agree with. I also slide fairly low. I also offer completely free of charge services to certain nonprofits. And while I 100% believe in charging what you feel you're worth and the value of yourself as a therapist, I am not a therapist who set her fee based on how I value my work. I actually set my fee entirely based on math.
I like that. Nam. I really encourage that to look at what do you need, how much can you work? Yeah.
Yes. And if you want to charge $5, charge $5. Don't do it at the cost of you not being able to, have a regular meal once a day. Pay attention to that. But I think it's time that we as therapists, while we entertain and honor this idea that I'm worth my fee, we also start recognizing that it doesn't have to be that complicated. Your worth will keep going up and down based on the day you have and based on who's in front of you. You want your fee to reflect something way more solid and honestly a lot easier. And I owe this to James, my partner and husband, who once was in the car with me and I was crying saying, everyone says I need to charge more and I don't value myself. And I really do. I think I'm worth $5,000. I'm not going to charge it. Why do people keep saying that to me? And he looked at me and he said, well, this doesn't have to be about emotions. It's just math. And I realized that, oh my gosh, that's actually what we need. We sometimes just need to identify our fee by going, okay, so what is it that I need? How do I want to live? What can the kind of clientele I target, what can they afford? And what would happen if we actually moved away from, for me to ask my ideal fee, I now have to do all of this work on my self-worth in 5 seconds, because that sometimes holds us back. So that's the fee I charge right now. I will continue to raise it based on ongoing needs, based on expenditures, based on different specializations. But what I will absolutely not do is make my fee about my self-worth.
Yeah, I like that too, because then $300 would be too little as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is the message then that we're giving? That it's not about the money, but somehow that monetary value has to reflect how you think about yourself. Oof.
Yeah.
We wouldn't always say that to a client who comes to us for self-esteem issues. The question we would ask them wouldn't be, so how much do you make in your job?
Yeah.
Maybe that needs to go up and then you'll feel more confident about yourself.
Yeah. It almost, it kind of feels more like the mason jars. Like, how much juice do you need to drink is kind of more, what do you need to charge? It's like, what does your life need and
Yes.
what takes care of you?
And I honestly, this is not just from my own process, but others that I've offered kind of support to in this whole fee realm, is when you fully let go of this idea. And this is not for all, it speaks to very specific therapists. When you let go of this idea that I should be able to say my fee is $250 because I am worth it. And you move into, on some days I feel worth it, and on some days I feel I shouldn't charge more than $10 because I'm having a bad day, because I have those days. But if I have a conversation with myself and I go, I need the $250 because I need to make sure that there's food on the table, that I can look after myself and my family, that I can pay, my monthly car payments, and it sucks if my client can't afford it, and I have options for that. But it's really because I need to live.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't change day to day.
That doesn't exactly. Mm-hmm. And if we keep working on that, there is something very unique that starts to happen. Your self-worth is allowed to blossom and flourish and grow based on something that is much deeper than how much you charge. It starts to grow because of the kind of conversation you have with these clients. It starts to blossom because of how you feel when you come home after a long day of 8 and 10 full fee clients and you go, I'm exhausted, but man, I love today.
Yeah. Yes.
How about we let that determine our self-worth and keep the whole fee thing just about math?
Love it, Nam. I love it.
Thank you. It's not, to be honest, this is not something I say out in the open a lot because I get scolded.
Will you join me for a listener question and help me answer something?
Yes.
Listener question.
Okay, I've been saving this one for you.
That's exciting.
So this person says, I'm inspired by your guests who have said they have practices with a majority of long-term, depth-oriented clients. I now consider myself a lifelong therapy client, but I didn't know I would make a long-term commitment when I began. How can I create this kind of practice from a marketing perspective?
Oh my goodness, the way that question is phrased is incredible to me because this person has the answer in their question.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
So this is something I actually thought about as well when I started doing this work and when I created my website. For me, what has worked and what I suggest to anyone who finds benefit in it is to create a practice and to put out marketing conversation out there that leads to long-term, depth-oriented clients, where we're talking about client retention in a lot of ways, is to actually let go of the idea that when my client, calls me for a consultation, or when my client reads my website or my social media, the goal is to get them in the room and keep them for a really long time. Fully suspend that. Mm-hmm. And here's what I mean by that. It's sort of a paradox. Much like this listener said that they didn't know that they were going to be a long-term client when they first came in. Nobody really knows. There are people we meet who like and enjoy therapy and want to experience therapy in that way, but they don't actually know that until they start, engaging in therapeutic conversations with us. So from a marketing perspective, what I would recommend is to create a marketing system, a marketing language, and a marketing personality that is truly about simply connecting with a person with no pressure of whether they will come in for one session or for the next 5 years. And actually say that. And I say that in my consult call as well, which is you and I may never speak again after these 20 minutes, or for all you know, you and I will be having these conversations for the next decade. I don't know. But what I do want you to know is that these 20 seconds or 20 minutes are really important to me. I want to make sure that at the end of this phone conversation, you walk away going, I'm not going to get those 20 minutes back, and I made the best use of them ever. So it's almost like the antithesis of how to get a client in the room is to not focus on getting that client in the room for the next dozen years. Yes. It's to let them know that it's okay if you don't want that. And it's okay if you do. How about we just focus on how is it that we work? How is it that we get along? And the moment that becomes known to a client, there's a certain level of comfort that shows up. Oh, there aren't any major strings attached. I don't have to be the client laying on a couch for 15 years talking about my mom and maybe getting somewhere in life. Then I can be the client who shows up for 2 sessions, has a problem addressed, and then disappears. But the moment that option becomes available, there's a connection that is formed. And that is usually the client who goes, wait a minute, I feel really comfortable here. I like that there's no pressure. I now want to stay. And so with the result, my practice is now fairly full of people I saw when they were once single and came to me for a dating group I used to run, and they've now shown up with partners and newborn babies. I have parents who just sent, kids off to college, and they had brought their kids to me when they were 10 and 11.
Yes.
I'm watching families grow in my practice, and they remain my clients, and they truly remain my clients because I don't put any pressure on them or myself in terms of marketing, to do with how long are you going to be in therapy or if you're even going to show up in my therapy office.
Yes. Yes. So it has nothing to do with asking people to make a commitment. It just has everything to do with being right there with them as they are.
Yes, and it's asking, even this listener who posed such a beautiful question, it's about asking yourself, what is it that made me want to talk to this person week after week for years?
Yeah.
Some of us don't even pick up the phone and talk to our parents that often.
That's right.
But there's something that happened with a therapist where there was a willing choice. It was an intention that I like you enough to come back week after week for so many years and have this conversation with you. What is that thing that you enjoy? Because that is likely the thing that this listener's future clients will enjoy as well.
So helpful. This is so
I'm
helpful.
glad. Such a great question.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Nam, what's the very best place for therapists to find you and throw compliments at you?
Throw compliments at me?
Yes.
And to find me. The best way to find me is online. It's send me an email. I am 100% unapologetically much better with email than I am with almost every other form of communication because I'm an introvert. If you pick up the phone and call me, I will panic for about 40 minutes figuring out what to say to you on the phone and then call you. But if you send me an email, I'm going to reply really quickly. So the email that is the easiest to reach me at is namtalkstherapy@gmail.com. I would love to hear from anyone who wants to ask questions, who wants to throw compliments, as you said, or who wants to say, you talk so much BS. I don't know how you put it out there. All of what you said sucks. I will listen to that with as much passion because I care about what people think in that way. So email would be the best way to reach me. And my website, of course, which is soulnarratives.com. So that's soulnarratives.
Beautiful.
Soulnarratives.com. Best ways to reach me.
I'm going to have that up on the show notes too.
Perfect. I would love to hear from anyone who wants to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nam. This was amazing.
Thank you so much, Annie. And I will forever remember this conversation with someone who saw value in a mason jar post on Instagram, because that's truly who I'm about. So thank you for seeing me, and thank you for asking me the questions that you did that allow me to hopefully support other people who feel similarly.
Yes. Yeah. And this is an hour I would never want to have spent a different way.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Nam.
Thank you, Annie.
This week's Snark Moment.
Snark Moment
is about my tendency to check my email, and I know I'm not alone in this. I'm not blaming anyone who emails me. I'm just blaming the part of my brain that wants to keep checking. So let's say I'm writing or working on something on my computer, which happens a lot. I go to refer to an email, and then I see a new email in my inbox, and I'm tempted to open it. So it's an important email, let's say, so I spend 5 minutes crafting a response or taking care of it, and then I forget what I was there looking at my email for in the first place, or at least I'm taken off track for a while. So here's a hack. I just started pausing my inbox. So if I feel like checking my email, I have to go through unpausing it first. My email is still available so I can refer to the stuff I need there, but no new emails will show up until it's unpaused. I love hacks like this that help me preserve my daily allotment of willpower. You can pause for the amount of time you want, maybe 1 hour or maybe 4 hours. It's just a little assistant to help you honor your intentions. Thanks for listening to Therapist Clubhouse. Can you help us out? Please head over to iTunes and rate and review Therapist Clubhouse. Just taking 30 seconds to do that really helps other therapists find us. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. I sound like I have a very gravelly voice.